Right, welcome back everyone. This is episode 2 of our series, Beekeeping from Day 1. I thought we'd start showing you some of the kit that you're going to need, and we thought I would start with the obvious, a beehive. So, this is a poly national hive. Poly, made of polystyrene, national, the type of frame it uses. This one is from a Beelo. It holds 12 frames. A normal national normally holds 11 frames. This is one of the best beehives on the market. We also have the Lyson Langstroth hive, which is very similar, distributed by a Beelo in the UK. Not only are these the best hives on the market in my opinion, but a Beelo have the best customer service in my experience. So if you're interested in beehives, definitely check them out. So let's take a look at the parts that come in with it. So you have to excuse me, we only use poly hives. There's a very good reason for that, it's just what we prefer. So I can't even show you what a wooden hive looks like. All of the parts function the same, they just look slightly different. So I'll run you through what this poly hive is and how it works. So first off, we've got the floor. The floor is obviously the floor, that's what everything sits on. Then we've got the door, and this door has this little sliding function. So during the winter we put it on this section, which is the mouse guard section. It stops the mice getting in there. We can have it on a reduced entrance all the way up to removing this little red thing. That gives us a wider entrance, and then in full summer we can take the entire thing out and expose the entire bottom board. Now you have to forgive me with this hive. It's sticky, it's covered in honey. It's one that we've had in the storage ready to be cleaned out, and I've stacked up a load of honey supers on top of it, and the honey supers are dripped out. So I'm sticky, but hey, I'm a beekeeper. Getting covered in honey is what we do. So that's the floor. This is the brood box. So you'll notice that this bottom box is deeper than these two boxes. This brood box is where the bees build their nest. Above that we've got what are called the supers. The supers are shallower, sometimes called shallows. The shallows, or the supers, are where the honey is stored. Then we've got the crown board, and we've got the roof. So let's take a look at the roof. First thing to note is this is a pretty solid thing. Now it isn't like the polystyrene you get in packaging. This is, I think it's 160 grams per litre, so it's a proper dense thing. But that's the roof, it just keeps the weather out and keeps the bees insulated. So then we've got the crown board. So the crown board basically separates the bees from the roof. On this particular one, we've got these two entrances here. So we remove these entrances when we're feeding, and depending on what type of feeding we're doing, we'll either remove this one and that one and put a feeder on top so that we can feed syrup, or in the winter, we just open this one and then we put a slab of fondant on top of this so that the bees can come up, access the food and go back down and still remain nice and warm overnight. So that's the crown board. Okay, now we're into the super. So the super is where the bees store the honey. And if you can see, that is a lovely bit of drawn honeycomb. That's ready to go into service this year. This was drawn out nice and fresh, lovely clean wax, and there's 12 frames in that. So the bees will come up and they will store the honey in the hexagonal wax, or the hexagonal comb that they've already drawn out. Now on this hive we've got 2 supers. We'll start them off with 2 supers, but in a good year you can end up with 4 to 7 supers high. Now that's pretty light. I reckon that weighs 5 kilos fully loaded. By the time that's full of honey, that's going to weigh 15 kilos. That's going to be heavy, but fun. So let's get down. Same again, another super. And then we're into this thing. This is a queen excluder. So the gaps in this piece of plastic here, that basically stops the queen from coming up So the worker bees can fit through the gaps, but the queen can't. So what that means is the queen is stuck in this bottom box, the bottom deep or the brood box. So the queen can only lay eggs in this box here. The queen cannot lay eggs in our super. Now you don't want the queen to lay eggs in the super, you want the queen just to lay eggs in this box. Keeps that wax nice and clean, and you don't get a build-up of all of the cocoons that are left behind when the bees emerge. So this is a plastic queen excluder. And here is a metal queen excluder. They both do exactly the same job. The plastic one is obviously more cheaper than the metal one. I don't know which one I prefer really. Both have their pros and cons. The metal ones are prone for bending when they get stuck down, and it's quite a specific gap. If you accidentally bend one of these bars when you're trying to lift them up, the queen can get through. I can guarantee if the queen can get through, she's going to get through. So that's the metal ones. And the plastic ones, they don't suffer from that issue, but they can sag. They're a little bit bendy. And so what it means is when you put it on top, they can sag. Now, there's something called a bee space. A bee space is a very specific dimension, 8 millimeters. If a gap in a hive is more than 8 millimeters, the bees will fill it with brace comb. If the gap is less than 8 millimeters, the bees will propolis it. Now, propolis is a very sticky resin. The bees collect it from trees and they use it for gluing things down or filling in gaps, or in the cavity in a tree, they cover the walls in it, and it is an antimicrobial, antibacterial substance, so the bees cover it in their home and it's sticky. So what you possibly can't see is there's a very specific dimension of 8 millimeters. That's what this groove provides on top, and that allows the bees to walk across the frames 8 millimeters. They won't fill it with wax and they won't propolis it down. With these plastic ones, you know what, they can sag a bit, especially when they get old, especially if they're left out in the sun. And if that sags down, you've got it. The bees will propolis it. So that's the downside to the plastic. Okay, then we're into the brood box. Now I've got a few combs in here just to show you. Now the brood box, you'll notice the comb, the frame, is much deeper. Let me just grab a shallow to show you. Okay, so you can see the difference there. Super, holding honey, brood frame, holding brood. Look at the difference in the sizes. Now, some people do use brood boxes for honey supers. Now you can just imagine the difference in the weight between the super frame and the brood frame. Well, that's probably another 40% bigger. That's even more weight to lift, but you know what? One thing you'll learn about beekeeping, everyone does it differently. Everyone has their own way. No one's right, no one's wrong. Whatever's right is whatever works for you. So there you go. You can see the difference in the two frame sizes. Now, let me see if I can show you this. Okay, now if you can see these parts here, the sidebars, we've got one which is pointed and one which is flat, and they butt up against each other. These are DN4 frames, Deep National 4 frames, and they provide the very specific bee space of 8 millimeters, so that the bees draw out just the right amount, of wax, so that you don't end up with fat chubby brood frames that when you pull them out they end up ripping. So that's very specific things. Other things to mention, this is wax. This is a sheet of wax foundation. You'll notice that, let's see, that side might be a bit better. You'll notice that it comes with these wires inside it. So this is a pre-wired wax foundation. Now, again, everyone does things differently. We always start off with wax foundation. It's imprinted with this hexagonal embossment, and that gives the bees something to start off with, and they know what they're going to draw. Now, some people don't even start with foundation. Some people just let the bees draw what they want, where they want, and that's fine. Some people start off with a little strip up here just to guide the bees. Again, that's fine. This is just what we do. It's up to you to make your decision, take your pick, and figure out what works for you. Okay, let's take the brood box off. So now we're down to the floor. What you will notice with the floor is this wire mesh. It's called an open mesh floor. Now you can get solid floors, you can get underfloor entrances where the bees come underneath and then up into the hive, or you've got the open mesh floors. Just so happens we use open mesh floors. There's no right or wrong, the bees do well in either one, so you take your pick. But the purpose of this is twofold. Firstly, it allows for some ventilation during the summer months so that the bees can help cool the hive down. And secondly, it helps detritus and, more importantly, varroa to fall through the mesh. So the varroa is a little parasite that lives on the bees. When it bites into the bees, they take a chunk out and then they spread the viruses throughout the colony much easier. So one thing we're doing as beekeepers is always monitoring for varroa signs and then treating at the right times of the year. So the point of this is when the bees groom each other and the varroa drops off, they fall through this mesh. And this is a varroa tray. This lives underneath the open mesh floor and it allows us to monitor the mite drop. This is particularly important when we're doing varroa treatments and we can see how many mites have fallen. Some people use it for monitoring for varroa drop throughout the year. All sorts of different ways you can use that. It also helps during the winter or during the spring to monitor the amount of detritus falling on the floor, and it lets you know where the colony is in the hive and what they're doing, whether they're uncapping honey stores or whether they're uncapping brood, or all sorts of different things you can tell from that. So again, some hives have them, some hives don't. All beekeepers have different opinions. Let me know in the comments below what you choose and why. Okay, so that's the beehive. Well, we've gone through the beehive. Let's take a look at some of the tools we're going to need. First off, fire. Okay, you don't need one like that, but it does make life easier. Now, that's what we use for lighting the smoker. One of these gas bottles lasts us a couple of years, to be honest with you. You can use matches, you can use lighters. I just like the gas. It's easy and it gets the job done quick. Smoker. Now, if there is ever such an iconic tool in the world of beekeeping, it is the smoker. Now this one's not lit. This is a Rouch boy. You can see after a while they start off nice and shiny, then they get all covered in tar. So you've got bellows and that pumps air through the firebox. We load this up with cardboard and pellets and whatever it is we're going to burn, and then smoke comes out the end. And I've already got myself covered in tar. You can see I've had a busy weekend on the bees. Okay, hive tools. So, two types of hive tool. Now, this one here is probably the most common. It's got a flat, sharp end and this little L-shaped lever and this little tool here. Now, I don't use this type of hive tool, but they all work pretty much the same. So, this end here, used for scraping propolis, scraping wax. When you're trying to lift a beehive, you're trying to separate the brood box from the supers and the bees have propolized it down. You get this in the little gap between the two and you prise it up. This end here is generally for putting in between two frames and levering them apart, especially when they're propolized down. Now this one, I believe, is for knocking off protruding nails. My beehives don't have nails, so I wouldn't know. But I guess you put it in there and don't know. But there you go. That's the first type of hive tool. And that's the second type of hive tool. This is what they call a J-hook. So it's pretty much the same. It's got that chamfered end, the little gap for screws or nails, and the J hook, so called because it's a J, I suppose. This is the type I use. It's a less popular type, but that's the one that suits me. So how this works, you've got the scrapey, you've got the levery part, and then you've got this little part here, which you can just hook underneath. You can just hook underneath a frame just to help you lever it out. Let me just show you. Okay, let's assume this is full of honey. This is in the beehive, full of bees. It's all properlised down. There's comb everywhere. It's the middle of July. It is crazy beekeeping season. We are on it. Fingers crossed. And we need to lift this out of the super just to check it. So this little J hook comes underneath here and it lets us lever it up. Now, the thing you have to be careful of is these lugs, especially on the National, they're a little bit delicate. So what you want to do is just pop this in between the two frames, the one that's this side of it and this frame, and just lever it apart just so it moves, just like that. That breaks the propolis seal, and then you can put the J hook underneath, and just to lever that side up, grab hold of that side, J hook back on this side, just lever it up, and then once it's up you can grab hold of the lugs and pull it up. So that's hive tools. Okay, now let's take a look at this curious looking torture device. This is called a crown of thorns. Let me get a frame and I'll explain that one as well. Okay, this is a shallow frame, so I can't be bothered to dig the deep out. So let's assume that this is a brood frame and the queen is marching across here. She is looking for a space to lay an egg in. But for whatever reason, I just need to hold her in one spot. Again, it's got these little thorns, and we can find the queen marching on the comb, and we can just pop that there, like that. Now, what that means, again, it's the same principle as a queen excluder. It will hold the queen in this little device. The queen can still walk around inside. Bees can come and go through those little gaps, but the queen can't. That's perfect if we just need to pop the queen off to one side whilst we're doing whatever manipulation it is that we need to do in the hive. It's also dead useful if we need to mark the queen. You can push this in, hold the queen steady, get your little pen, mark the abdomen, let it dry, and release the queen. So, crown of thorns. I don't even know what these things are called. I don't like them. They queen catcher, I don't know what it's called. So the idea with this, again, you've got the queen marching on top of the frame and we need to isolate her or move her for whatever reason. You just lift this little plunger down and you place that over the top, and that's why I don't like it. And then you scoop the queen up by pushing that door closed, and then we've got the queen captured in here, and you can just gently push that up so that we've got access to mark the queen in the top. Now, straight off the bat, you can see why I don't like these things. They're just clunky. Once they get sticky and you're trying to push that little door closed, it can jam, it can jerk, and you know what? You just made a guillotine there, and if you end up chopping the queen in half, disaster. So, some people love them, some people don't. They just don't work for me. Now, another thing that doesn't work for me is queen cages. I don't know whether I just bought the wrong one or a cheap one, I don't know. So again, the idea is, got the queen marching on the cage, and we open this device like this. We pop it on the frame and it just scoops the queen up and the queen cannot get out of there. I'm sure they do better ones. Maybe I just cheaped out and bought the wrong one, but they don't work for me. They're just not that smooth, especially once they get a bit sticky. Now, I see a lot of people using them when they're catching swarms, and I can understand that that's a good thing. You've got a big ball of bees and you can see the queen in there. You can just get that in there, grab the queen. Once you've got the queen, you can capture the swarm. That's the hard part done. So, again, I don't know what they're called, but they don't really work for me. So what's next? Gloves. All right, I've just so happened to pick up Laurie's gloves, size small, so they're not going to fit me. But these are blue nitrile long cuff gloves, long cuff examination gloves. Don't know what you're going to examine that means you need to have a long cuff, but that's a pretty deep examination. So the reason we wear these gloves is twofold. Firstly, when you're in a hive, things can get dead sticky. You can get covered in propolis, which makes you look like an 80-year-old pipe smoker. So having a disposable glove just means that you can take the glove off, you've got clean hands again. It helps minimize the spread of disease if you're going between different colonies. But this being nitrile is very limited in terms of sting protection. It's long cuff so that it actually does come up over your bee suit, but you do get stung through these. Now the sting is less, the bees sort of struggle to get a grip on it, but you get stung through them. The other type of gloves is like a leather gauntlet glove. Now I would try and avoid those where possible. You won't get stung through them, but where you do get stung on the glove, there is alarm pheromone and they're very difficult to wash. And one thing about getting stung is the bees will leave alarm pheromone, and that acts as a bullseye. That lets the rest of the bees know, there he is, get him, or her. So the other thing with thick type of gloves is when you're picking up a frame and it's covered in bees and we're dealing with a monster beehive that looks like a totem pole, and you need to pull this frame out, you need to grab hold of the lugs. With thick gloves, you can't really tell whether you're pinching a bee or squashing a bee, and if there's any way you want to set off a beehive argument, it's squashing bees. That releases the alarm pheromone, all the bees get riled up, pandemonium. Personally, where possible, I try not to use gloves, but if you're starting out, definitely use gloves. Now, a nice intermediate level between the two is the standard marigold gloves that you find in kitchens. Now, they are rubber, so you get a little bit more texture. You do get stung through them, but not as much, and you can wash them a lot easier. So certainly if you've been stung through them, you can go and wash them, or if you're going between hive and you want to reduce the risk of disease, then they're easy enough to wash. So my recommendation for your first year, probably start with the marigolds. We did. We soon moved up to the nitriles, and once you've got a bit more experience and a bit more confidence, just use your mitts. Right, let's take a look at the next thing, the bee suit. Okay, so bee suits, possibly the most important tool you need to buy. Now, we use two types of bee suits. This is an Oz Armour ventilated mesh bee suit. So, let's see if we can get a close-up of the material. Okay. Now, what you'll notice is there is that two different layers. Underneath, you've got a kind of very plastic sort of mesh. Let me see if I can turn it inside out. You can't see any better there. There's a very plastic sort of mesh, and then the second layer is this much finer mesh, I guess something like a pair of curtain drapes. So the idea behind this is twofold. Firstly, that layer of plastic mesh is too deep for the bee sting to penetrate. So a bee can still try and sting this, but it can't actually reach your skin because it's got this layer of plastic beneath it. I love this type of bee suit. The other advantage of it is it's ventilated. Now, beekeeping in the summer is a hot, sweaty game. If you're wearing a traditional type of bee suit and it's 20-30 degrees and you're lifting heavy boxes and going from hive to hive, boy, you can get hot and sticky and sweaty fast. So ventilated bee suit, that's my preferred choice. This is the traditional beekeeping hat. I don't know what they call it, but there you go, traditional type. The Oz Armour comes with two types of hats. It comes with the fencing style veil and this one. Now, again, my personal preference, I prefer these. I find you just get much more vision, much more 360-degree vision all the way around. And the second thing, I know I've got big ears, but I was wearing the fencing style mask once before just because I thought I looked cool, and bee stung me right in the ear. The veil on the fencing style mask is just a bit close to your face at certain times, and I tell you what, getting a sting in the ear, oh, it's got to be the second most painful place you can get a sting on the body. First one is on the nose, just on this bit here. That's going to give you tears in your eyes. Second place is on your ear, and the third place is where I got stung yesterday, just because I was being lazy. I didn't have my welly boots on and I got a sting in my ankle. Oh! So that type of suit is a full body suit. We quite often wear a smock, a jacket type suit, so it's just the top, especially if we're wearing trousers, if it's a little bit cooler. I would definitely wear the full beekeeping suit if we're going into a big colony, especially at certain times of the year when they might become a little bit more defensive. Definitely a full-bodied one. But you know what, most of the time I just put my smock on. The main thing you need to do is have your face covered. If a bee's going to sting you, they're going to try and sting you in the eye, and a sting in the eye, I assume it'll make you blind. It certainly feels like it would. So never open a colony without a veil on. I've done it before thinking, right, I just want to put some feed on, take a quick look, cracked it open, and the grumpiest bee's gone. Not today, buddy. Pow! Yeah. So you learn from your mistakes. The other bit of kit we mentioned just now is welly boots, or at least some kind of footwear which comes up your ankle that your bee suit or your trousers or whatever it is you're wearing to protect your legs can fit into, just to stop the bees climbing down and stinging your ankles. It hurts. Well, there's going to be lots of other things that I've forgotten to mention. I'm looking around, I'm thinking straps, I'm thinking hive stands. We haven't even looked at extraction equipment, whether that's spinners and bottle machines, and the list goes on. But that's the basics. That's the stuff we use day to day, the stuff that is an absolute must if you want to start beekeeping. The rest you can improvise. Okay, but extraction equipment, yeah, it's lovely to have a 12 frame electric spinner, or even a 20 frame electric spinner, maybe a hydro press and capping machine. You don't need it, especially if you're starting out. If you're starting out and you can't afford an extractor, if you use unwired wax foundations, you can just scrape the comb out, you put it in a little potato strainer and you can press the honey out. It's messy, but it works. We've done it. We did it the first year and hey, it worked. We didn't have to spend hundreds of pounds on extractor. So what else is there? Haven't mentioned feeders. I don't have any feeders to hand, but what I would say is get the right type of feeder for the hive you're getting. So speak to the manufacturer, speak to the shop you're getting it from, and if it were me, I would just buy everything as a kit. Okay, maybe not your suit, but buy the beehive, get the right frames for the hive, get the right feeder for the hive. When I started out, I went and bought actually we went to the beekeeping show. Can't remember which one it was, and we bought everything as a kit, all from one place, so that we knew that everything was going to be right, especially for the first year. Now, if I'm mistaken, I think I even bought assembled frames. I think we was moving house at the time. I didn't have time to sit down and build frames, and it just felt easier. So we bought everything all assembled, all ready to go, literally just add bees and go. Now, just expanding on that a little bit further, Most poly hives, they come assembled. That's one of the joys of them. For a lot of wooden hives, you have to assemble them yourselves. So just be prepared for that. If you're buying a hive, it'll come flat packed and it's dead easy. It's like finger joints and you have to glue and screw them together, and the National is a lot harder to build than the Langstroth. There's more parts to it. You need a square, you need to be reasonably handy with tools and materials. I think places like Thorns, maybe a Beelo, they do pre-assembled wooden hives. You'd have to check the website out for that. It's just something to consider. But the frames are dead easy to build, but when you've got a lot of them to build, it can take a lot of time. So if you've got spare time on your hands, I think Thorns have a good video on their YouTube channel showing you how you assemble their frames. They use one of those little toffee hammer types and you tap, 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 and I don't have time for that. We go through thousands of frames a year. We've got a pneumatic nail gun and pow, 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 pow. Okay, I say we, it's not we, my mum does that. We employ my mum, that's her job in the beekeeping business throughout the winter. One of those winter jobs that you have to allow time for, building frames. Well, there we go. I think that's just about everything I can think of. The essential kit you need to get started in beekeeping. I say essential, it's just because it's the stuff you have to have. There's loads of stuff you can have. There's loads of stuff you might want to have. There's loads of stuff people will recommend, but that is the essential stuff. That gets the bees in the box, it gets the season underway, and later on in the season, if you're lucky enough to get a honey crop, at least you've got options. So, if you like this content, if you like to learn about beekeeping and what's involved, and you want to follow through the season how a nucleus colony will expand into the beehive we've just seen, we'll fill that out and it'll start producing honey, and then we'll go into the honey crop. Then hit the like, hit the subscribe, and we'll see you in the next episode. I'm Charlie from Jurassic Bees. Catch you later.